So you guys know how 2020 sucked? Yeah, well, among all of the deaths, one stands out as possibly one of the most tragic of the last decade at the very least, an alligator named Saturn. Now, you're probably already in tears, but let me elaborate a little. So I was reading the Wikipedia page for alligators in class when I came across the line, "No average lifespan for an alligator has been measured." It followed up by saying one of the oldest recorded alligator lives was that of Saturn, an American alligator who was hatched in 1936 in Mississippi and spent nearly a decade in Germany before spending the majority of its life in a Moscow zoo, where it died at the age of 83 or 84 on May 22nd of 2020. Now, I'm a little confused. If you know when it hatched, how do you not know how old he was when he died? Finally, I was sucker punched in the face when I hovered over Saturn's name, as the second line of the article states, he was the subject of an urban myth that he was previously Adolf Hitler's pet alligator. Two questions immediately come to mind. Why did Hitler have an alligator, and why did Hitler maybe have an alligator? According to Wikipedia, both of these questions have boring answers. He didn't. Apparently, it was never his personal alligator. He just visited Saturn at the Berlin Zoological Garden often. If you're as notorious as Hitler, just being interested in something enough can apparently spawn the idea that it's yours. That also means this video is clickbait, but you've probably already clicked off by now. Because this alligator was in Berlin during World War II, its enclosure was completely destroyed by bombings. Press reports documented that the streets near the aquarium were littered with alligator and crocodile corpses, but that some, including Saturn, had survived and were just wandering through the city in search of food. Now, as tragic as that sounds, I can't help but admit that's a hilarious visual, just a crocodile searching down the street on the sidewalk or something. Saturn was moved to the Moscow Zoo as you can't just have alligators roaming the streets. It's believed that Saturn had PTSD because when tanks were moving down the Garden Ring in 1993, Saturn began to cry and scream and throw a pissy fit. Some believe this is because it was reminding him of the Battle of Berlin. I swear to God, the further I go into this, the weirder it gets. The United States gave the Soviet Union a female alligator named Shipka in the middle of the Cold War, you know, as you do, and Saturn began to mate with her. Unfortunately, Shipka was infertile and she later died without the two ever having children. Saturn, having many human characteristics of depression, refused to eat due to his alligator wife's death. Alright, so I'm just gonna read this entire next section verbatim from Wikipedia. During his time in the Moscow Zoo, Saturn experienced several narrow escapes from death. In the 1980s, a slab of concrete fell from the aquarium ceiling into the alligator enclosure, but it was in a protective niche at the time. In 1990, a new aquarium building was built, but Saturn resisted the move, refusing to eat for 4 months and coming close to death. On another occasion, a drunk zoo visitor threw a boulder at his head to wake him up, after which zoo veterinarians fought to keep him alive for months. Later, a group of tourists threw glass bottles at Saturn, injuring him. After these incidents, the enclosure was made more secure with the addition of a thick glass wall. Yeah, why wasn't that done before? It's an alligator. Why was there pretty much no protection for him at all? In the 2010s, Saturn once again stopped eating, this time for nearly a year. Zoo staff took blood samples for analysis and injected him with vitamins to keep him alive. He eventually resumed eating. All these occurrences of not eating made me curious to how long an alligator can fast, and apparently they don't need food for 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years. Saturn died on the 22nd of May 2020, the same day that Pakistan International Airlines Flight 8303 crashed into a neighborhood in Pakistan, killing 98 people. It would need some substantial evidence to convince me that these two events weren't related. Although he may not have been Hitler's alligator, in fact, frankly, he had practically nothing to do with Hitler, Saturn was probably the most interesting alligator I've ever read about. Of course, he's also the only alligator I've ever read about. In search for more weird famous animals, I stumbled upon a terrible slap-together article by Time. 100 most influential animals. Number 3 is an eagle named Uncle Sam, and its description just reads, "None of the GOP candidates' attacks on Trump did him any damage, but when a 27-year-old American eagle named Uncle Sam showed up to the 25th floor of the Trump Tower for a Time magazine cover shoot with the Donald, he took the billionaire down." I don't have any interest in politics, but literally none of that means anything. Number 6. Pizza rat. Literally just a pizza rat. The description is one line and it just says it's a rat with pizza. Journalism at its finest. Number 10, Angry Birds. You've just given up at this point. The description is a remark about the movie they made about them. This just reads like a middle schooler's essay. Number 19, cow that gave stem cells for in vitro meat burger? Thanks to the stem cell donations of one anonymous cow. How is one anonymous cow influential? It could also get the far right angry about cow abortions despite the fact that they don't exist. I skimmed the rest of the article for anything notable, but there's nothing of value here. Number 94 is Brian Griffin if you're curious about where he was on the list. And now, the most notorious cow of US history. Your mother. Just kidding. It's actually a cow that belonged to Catherine O'Leary. Catherine O'Leary had 5 children and was married to Patrick O'Leary. One of her sons, James, owned a saloon and managed an amusement park. So what's so special about her cow exactly? Well, this cow decided to kick over a lantern while being milked. This lantern started a small fire that quickly grew due to the dry weather and high winds. The fire spread far past the barn and burnt down 3 miles worth of Chicago and caused roughly $5 billion worth of damage, killing 300 people in the process. If it wasn't already apparent, this cow, who doesn't even have a name, is often credited for causing the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And now, the one I've saved for last. This is possibly my favorite one of the entire list. Last year I was reading the Wikipedia page for cockroaches, and at the very end of the entire page is a section called Cultural Depictions. At the very end of this section is a line that reads, "Cockroaches have been used for space test. A cockroach given the name Nazda was sent into space by Russian scientists as a part of the Photon M mission, during which she mated, and later became the first terrestrial animal to produce offspring that have been conceived in space." Wildly intrigued, I went to the specific cockroach's page, which it further explained that this entire ordeal was recorded by a camera on the ship. So to break that all down for you, numbskull, there is a Russian government-sanctioned cockroach birthing video set in space. I promise you, I searched the entire internet for this video and couldn't find it anywhere. If you're wondering whether or not being born in space had any effect on the roaches, apparently they were slightly darker in color, but that's about it. And that's the end of the video. I recorded this entire thing in about an hour and wrote the entire script in maybe 2. What are you still doing here? Go home. Really, it's the end of the video. Go home.